first of all, I'm Jamie Dangler. I'm the president of the Homeville Museum Board, and we all welcome you here. And since it's such a cold day, and I don't want to forget, we have hot coffee, hot chocolate, etc., and cookies in the cafeteria after Dale's presentation. So please stay and warm yourself up before you go back out in the cold. So just a few announcements, and then I'll turn it right over to Dale. First of all, there are a lot of people here at the Central New York Living History Center who are volunteers, and they help make events like this possible. So just a shout out to all of the volunteers, our board members, and folks who staff the front desk, who serve as guides. So we really want to thank all of those volunteers.
All that without notes. And I'm old enough so that I'm gonna go off of my notes. So excuse me for having to look down once in a while. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dale Taylor. I was the fourth and final owner of Sarvay Shoe Company. We ended up on Main Street, but we started out at 13 Railroad Street at the time, Central Avenue now. Today, my goal is going to be to entertain you a little bit and to educate you some. And hopefully I'm not going to waste your time, but really this is way better than being out in 7 degrees. So. I know some folks when they come here use a PowerPoint, but I'm an old soul. So no PowerPoint today. So we'll start out with a little bit of history for context. In 1890, the average wages for a laborer were $1 to $1.50 a day. There weren't any cars. Everybody rode around on horses or a horse-drawn carriage. There were no paved roads between towns. It was a really, really different world than what we're used to now. So in 1890, Merton Sarvay, the fellow who started this whole thing, was a traveling leather salesman. That was a thing back then. You'd travel from town to town. He worked for a tannery called Thomas Proctor out of Powell, Pennsylvania. And one of his customers happened to be a shoemaker who worked for a company called Passage in Overton. They had a shoe store on Railroad Street. And so Merton would call on this fellow to sell him leather because he was a shoe repairman. He needed leather to do his job. Over the course of a couple of years, Merton became good friends with not only the cobbler, but with Passage in Overton. And it turns out that those two fellows were ready to get out of the business. So I do have a letter here. You can take a look at all this stuff when we're done. But I have a letter here where it talks about the transfer from Passage in Overton to Merton Sarvay. At the time, it cost him $2,514.77 to buy the shoe store from Passage in Overton. It cost me way more than that. The cobbler, his name was William Bell. Obviously, I never met him, but he lived upstairs over the old shoe store on Central Avenue. The only reason I know any of that is because in the back of the store, there's a hole in the ceiling. And one day I asked James Sarvay, what's that hole in the ceiling for? And this guy lived up there. He would lower a basket down. They had a little pulley system. Lower a basket down. They'd put over the day's repairs were into the basket, haul them up. He'd work on them overnight, and the next morning they'd be back down there. And so that continued on until the 1950s. He worked there until he passed away. They always called him the lad. So, that's, well, the lad will take care of that. The lad lived up there. So even though he was ancient, he was always called the lad. During World War I, Merton's son John was called to serve in Europe. Drafted. Before he went overseas, however, he'd been offered a job by the B.F. Goodrich Company selling rubber boots and overshoes in Brooklyn. And at the time, that territory generated about $60,000 worth of sales on an annual basis. I'm not sure what the commission rate would be on a $60,000 territory, but I'm sure it was more money than what they were making to run a shoe store. So he had taken this job, but then he got called overseas. And the company said, go ahead, we'll hold this job for you until you get back from the service. And when you come back, it's your job. Well, when he got back, they said, you know what, the guy that's there is doing a pretty good job. We're not gonna take you to Brooklyn, but you can have Syracuse as a territory if you want that. John didn't like that. He said, no, you know what, I'll work for my father until that Brooklyn territory opens up, and then I'll take that Brooklyn territory. Well, one thing led to another. He never left the shoe store. He started working for his dad, and he stayed there until 1970. I never met John. I started at the store in 1977. John passed away in 1970. But I'm told that he was quite a character. He liked to sing to his customers while he was sitting on a shoe fitting stool. And if it would make a sale, he would get up and dance a little jig, dance around until they said, okay, we'll buy the shoes. He also liked to smoke cigars. And one night, I don't know if he was waiting on a customer or what, but he put it, I don't know if you remember the shoe store on Central Ave, but we had rows and rows of women's shoes on one side and men's shoes on the other. He put his cigar butt on one of the shelves that held the shoes and forgot it. That smoldering cigar butt started a fire, burned the front off of all the shoe boxes on the women's side of the store. The shoes inside were good, so they had a fire sale after that. John was also friends with George Wiltsey. And I'm sure some of us can still remember the Wiltsey store that used to be on Main Street when we were kids. It's where the Marketplace Mall is now for young people like me. Because of that friendship between George Wiltsey and John Sarvay, Wiltsey's department store chose not to sell any shoes. They sold all kinds of other things, but they didn't sell shoes because the two of them were friends. And the other thing that came of that friendship was, again, I don't know if you recall, but between the two stores, there was a huge metal door. It weighed a ton. You had to open and shut it every morning, close it every night. But they cut that through the bearing wall of those two buildings so that John or George could have lunch together and they didn't have to walk outdoors if it was a nasty day or if it was raining. But that's why that door came to be. It also allowed customers to go back and forth between the two stores, so it was probably beneficial in multiple ways. John was, I'm told, a very punctual man. Liked to be at the shoe store promptly at 9 o'clock. So the employees that were there one morning in May of 1970 thought, why isn't John here? And so they sent one of their part-timers, a guy named Paul Mazzone, who some of you probably know. He worked at Brain Midland, he worked at HSBC and Tompkins Trust Company before he left. They sent Paul to go find out what was holding up John. Paul opened the door, and there's John laying dead at the bottom of the stairs, had his coat and tie on, but he was ready to go to work right up to the day he died. I wasn't quite that interested. One of the longtime employees that I did know, and again, some of you folks probably met, Harold Harvey. Harold Harvey was a great old guy that I met in 1977 when I came on. He started working at the shoe store when he was 16 years old, still in high school. He worked there every day until he retired in 1975. He actually was a partner in the store for some of those years. Even after he retired in 1975, he would come to the store, not every day, but he had coffee with a bunch of his old friends, and after he had coffee, he would come to the shoe store, down the stairs, down into the cellar, to check the pipes. He said that was where our bathroom was downstairs. So he was checking our pipe and checking his pipe at the same time. John Sarvay had 3 kids, Jim, Mert, and Laurel. Jim was the fellow that I bought the store from. After he got called to serve in World War II, he had tour duty in Europe. He came back home, graduated from Syracuse University.
I bought tickets.
he spent some time in the Binghamton 10 as a salesman for the Letterly Laboratory Company. They make pharmaceuticals. It's Central Vitamins, you might recognize Central Vitamins. And after working for Letterly, he went out west and worked for Standard & Poor's of the S&P 500 fame in San Diego. But in orange and green rawhide chairs that were, they were special at the time, I guess, but we did not keep those when we moved up onto Main Street. So that's anyways where I come in, 1977. I grew up on the Scott Road in Homer, next to McMahon Home Farm. I graduated from Homer High School in 1973. I went to TC3 for a couple years. I spent a semester at Cornell. During all that time, I was stringing tennis rackets at Wilton Sporting Goods, so I will tell you can't go to Cornell and string tennis rackets at the same time. It doesn't work. One of the problems that Wilton's had while I was there was they got a whole bunch of their stainless steel tennis rackets that came back all rusty. So I had been on the night shift from 4 to 12, and when that happened, they shut down the stainless steel tennis rackets, and I got put onto the aluminum shift that started at 7 o'clock in the morning with a huge pay cut. I'd been making about $15,000 a year, and all of a sudden I was making $6,500. And I thought, I can make that kind of money anyplace. So, I don't know if you remember, in 1977, there was a company called Rainbow Vacuum Cleaners. And they were hiring door-to-door salesmen, and I thought, well, I can do that. So I arranged an interview with the Rainbow Vacuum Cleaner Company. It was down on Central Avenue next to the St. Charles Hotel. They had an office. And I was really early to that interview, so I had some time on my hands. I thought, well, I'll walk up on Main Street, and I'll apply for some jobs up there. So I went into A. Lewis, I went into Bowker's, I went into Latimer's, and Fulmer's, and Burgess's. And on my way back down Central Avenue, I thought, well, I'll stop into Sarvay's. I'll apply there. What the heck? Jim Sarvay said, well, you're a good-looking candidate, but I just hired somebody. And so, thanks for stopping, but no thanks. So, like I said, I grew up next to the McMahon Home Farm, and they had just recently bought the Creel Farm on, just outside of Homer. And the old barn there had a tin roof, metal roof, and Dick McMahon said, well, you can paint that roof if you want something to do. So they hooked a ladder over the top of the thing with a rope, and I'm hanging there painting this aluminum paint on that roof. And after a couple of weeks, Jim Sarvay called me and said, the guy quit. The new guy quit, and would you still be interested? And being on the ground in the shoe store was way better than being on the end. So I went back and had a second interview, and I started on the 22nd of August in 1977. For those of you who don't know, the end of August in a shoe store it's our Christmas, it's our Super Bowl, it's back to school time, and it's busier than heck. So I went in, and my training lasted about half an hour. Jim said, the men's shoes are on that side, the women's shoes are there, kids' shoes are out back. There's a Brannick device. Here's the shoe horn. Good luck. Oh, cash register and the spindle. When you make a sale, write up a receipt, put it on a spindle. Good luck. Go get it. So, to be honest with you, that first few days was crazy, and I was ready to quit. After about the first week, I thought, man, I'm in way over my head. But like I said, I worked with the McMahons, and I was really good at slinging bullshit. So I started out as a 20-hour-a-week part-timer. There were two other full-time guys there when I started. One of them went on to be a pastor. One of them went on to be a planning director for the city of Cortland. So I moved up. And Jim and I got along really well. He took me to shoe buying shows up in Syracuse, where he asked my opinion about what kind of stuff we should have in the store. And after a while, he gave me a chance to actually say, this is what I think we should buy going forward. And for most of us here, the 1970s were a tough time for retail for sure. There was the oil embargo, Brockways closed up, put a lot of people out of work. There was high inflation, and our sales at the shoe store before I got there had gone down several years in a row to the point where it wasn't really sure whether we were going to make it or not. But that first year that I was there, our sales went up by 25%. And the second year, they went up 50%. And by the time I'd been there in 1984, we had increased our sales by 3 times. So things were going good. I met my wife Kathy at the shoe store. She's sitting here in 1978.
Dale, how many pairs of shoes does she have to buy before you finally notice?
I'm getting there, Nick. So, like Dottie Sarvay, my wife was a kindergarten teacher. So it's an interesting turn of events. She had been jilted by one of her former boyfriends, and she came into the shoe store to do something to cheer herself up. And I did what I could. She's the only customer I ever married. We did get married in 1979, a year later. Mick was my best man. We have two kids, Sarah and Matt, both of whom worked at the shoe store during high school. After Sarah was born in 1981, Jim asked me if I'd like to be a partner in the shoe store. He had 2 boys, Jim and Peter. They didn't want to be the 4th generation owners. And at that time, 1981, it was a really, really good opportunity. Smith Corona still had 5,000 people that worked out there. Walmart was still a dinky little store in Benton, Arkansas. And Al Gore hadn't invented the internet yet, so no Amazon. I bought 2 shares of shoe store stock in 1981 and 4 the next year. Took me 12 years until I owned all 250 shares. It's a corporation, so there's shares of stock in 250. It took me 12 years. We moved the store from 13 Central Avenue to 50 Main Street in 1987, so I'd been there 10 years. We closed on Saturday afternoon at 5 o'clock, and on Sunday and Monday, we moved 10,000 pairs of shoes, all the furniture, all the fixtures, and we opened up Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock. So we were closed for 1 business day, 2 days total. Jim continued on from 1987 until 1993. That was our 100th anniversary at that point. He was 70 years old, and it was time for him to retire. I think it was time. Like Jim with Harold Harvey, I was very fortunate to have 2 very long-time employees, and I won't call them employees, I'll call them co-work, because they didn't work for me. They worked for you folks. They worked with me. Barb McGraw, who again, oddly enough, was one of Dottie Sarvay's kindergartners when she was a kindergarten teacher, and Janet Toomey. Both of them had been there almost 30 years when we closed up in 2014. I also, after Jim retired, had quite a string of high school boys that worked for me. Jane Snell's son, Matt, Jeff Taylor, Matt Hale, Kevin Withy, and Nate Porter. And besides my own 2 kids that worked for me during high school, my brother Mark worked for me off and on. He worked at SUNY Cortland, but he'd work on Thursday nights and work on Saturdays. And Andrew McMahon. So that goes back a long ways. Andrew worked there during high school and during her college years, and after she graduated, anytime I needed help, I would call these people up, and they were great help over the course of time. Over the course of time, our former employees have gone on to be bank managers, Palmazone, teachers, Broadway actors, police officers, investment brokers, nurses, lawyers, East Coast managers for the Crown Plaza hotel chain, and a placement director at St. Lawrence University. George Bowker and Dick Colgrove actually opened their own shoe stores, George here in Cortland and Dick up in Fulton. There was lots and lots of change that occurred while Sarvay's was in business, from horse-drawn carriages to cars, and airplanes to space stations. Sarvays managed to survive the World War I, the Great Depression, shoe rationing during World War II, where you could only buy a certain number of pairs of shoes each year. Hard to imagine that. The Kennedy assassination, Watergate, oil embargoes, and hyperinflation of the 1980s. Sarvays also outlived Brockway Trucks, Durkee's Bakery, Smith Corona, Brewer Ticheners, Rubbermaid, Buckley Mears, and Wilson Sporting Goods. While we were there, we saw the passing of A. Lewis, Jones Jewelry, Wiltsey's, Leonard's, Julia's, Latimer's, Bowker's, Nordic Sports, Payne Brothers, Bentley's, Mullins, Fiorentini's, the Rose Company, and Barbara Moss. Just think of what Main Street looked like all those years ago. It was great. Different world, different world. At the time I retired in 2014, people asked me, why'd you retire? Well, 37 years is a long time. I've been there 37 years, and the writing was kind of on the wall. Don't get me wrong, I think the internet is a great thing for looking stuff up. But I still think that you should try shoes on. I still think shoes should be made of leather. I don't think you should just point and say, add them to my cart. So that's not my thing. But I will say there's a fellow named Tony Say, H-S-E-H, he's an Oriental guy. He started the Zappos website when he was in college. He was 24 years old. When he turned 30, he sold it to the Amazon people for $1 billion. Been in business 6 years. I figured out that I would have had to work for 2,500 years. So again, it was time to go. Folks ask me all kinds of questions still when I see them on the street. They want to know one thing: where did the Sarvays stained glass signs go? One of them went to Jim's daughter Martha. She lives down in Washington, D.C. One of them went to Jim's son James, who lives out in Oregon, and then Elizabeth got the upright one that went on the front of the store. What happened to the white cats, Charlie and Annie? My wife had an aide when she was a kindergarten teacher whose husband, Scott Snyder, owns a lumber company called Tioga Lumber down in Owego. And he thought that they would be a good addition to his office. He's got 5 women that work for him down there, and he was willing to take them. And those 5 women, they fawn over those cats, or did. So I fed those cats every day, brushed them, cleaned their litter box every day for 7 years that I had them. We went down after about 6 weeks to see them. Gone. We don't know you. We can care less who you are. People ask me if I miss it. Do I miss being in business? I miss the people. I miss this interaction. That's something that I always enjoyed, shooting a breeze with people. And if you bought a pair of shoes, good. And if you didn't, we still had a good time shooting a breeze. So I miss that, but I don't miss being in business. I don't miss having to get up early on a snowy morning to go shovel out my sidewalk because the city decided that 3 feet of snowbank in front of my store looked good. So I'd have to shovel it in my truck and haul it away. I don't mind having to clean up after some drunk college kid who threw up on my sidewalk because the awning kept it from getting wet. I don't mind having to worry about if I bought too many boots or not enough boots. Some winters, early winter like this, you sold a lot of boots, but there was one winter, 2007, didn't snow until the 19th of January, and nobody wanted boots on the 19th of January because spring was coming. So, I don't miss that part of it. And the other thing, when I started with Nike in 1979, they were a $66 million company. $66 million is a lot of money. But when we got done in 2014, they'd grown to $15 billion. So it was huge growth. And we could, when they would come in, we could buy anything. The guy would spread out his stuff on the floor, and we'd say, okay, we want 36 of those, and 24 of those, and 18 of those, and whatever it was we wanted, we could buy. At the end, I had to go to Syracuse and sit with 10 other retailers and they would tell me what I could buy. I couldn't buy the Forrest Gump shoe, for instance, the Cortez. I couldn't buy it. I couldn't buy the Michael Jordan shoes. Oh, even though the first year they came out, nobody knew Michael Jordan was. I could buy them then. But at the end, oh, those are for dicks, or those are for athlete's foot. You can't have those, but you can buy these, and this is your choice. So again, I don't miss that part of the business. That got to the point where that was no fun. I mentioned when I started that I would do a little education. So I will give you just a few, very few shoe facts. Someplace here I've got what's called a Brannock device. And you guys are more than welcome to come look at any of this stuff when you're done. We'll leave it up. Brannock devices are actually made in Syracuse. It's how they measure feet. And it was interesting, or it was an update over the things that came to begin with, because all these things did, these Ritz sticks they're called, was measure the length of your foot. The Brannock device gave you a chance to measure the width of your foot as well. And so that was a huge, huge upgrade. And I use this every day to get a general estimate as to what somebody's foot size was. There are 6, when you look at that thing, all those little lines represent a half size. So there are 6 half sizes to each inch on that measure. So when I would try to talk somebody to, let's go up a half size. Oh no, I can't go that big. It's like, it's a 1/6 of an inch. But you would think that I was pulling somebody's teeth to get them to change a half of the size. Not a big deal. Your feet change sizes. Here's another little educational thing. Your feet change sizes over the course of your life. Some of you are willing to admit that, and some people, like Judy Lundeen, who just told me she still wears this shoe from when she was in high school, says, oh no, my feet haven't changed any size.
Just saying.
When I started at the shoe store, I wore 10.5. By the time I got done, it was a 14. Your feet flatten out. It's just your arch gives into gravity, and there's nothing you can do about it. So there is no right size. People say, what size do I wear? It's like, well, whatever fits. That's what size you wear. The shoe that fits is the size you should wear. Babies will change a shoe size about every 3 months. So if you've got grandchildren, don't be surprised if you got to buy a new pair of shoes about every 3 months. And kids that are in elementary school will change about a size and a half every time you go. If they wore a 5 last time, they're probably going to wear 6.5 this time. And it's not, again, it's half of an inch, 3 half sizes at half an inch. A little known fact is that men were the first gender to wear heels. Back in the Mongol dynasty, Genghis Khan, they would ride horses across the Asian steppes, and in order to keep their feet in the stirrups, they put heels on their shoes so that they could get into those stirrups and stay on their horses. So it's not just women that wear heels. Another fact, Imelda Marcos. We've all heard of Imelda Marcos, I'm sure. She was the wife of the president, I guess he was of the Philippines. When they captured them, she had 1,056 pairs of shoes in her possession. The average American woman right now has about 19 pairs of shoes. So I will tell you that my wife and Andrea McMahon are way above average. Way above. You should probably, another fact, you should probably own several pairs of shoes and rotate between them. Don't get one pair of shoes and say, boy, I love this pair, I'm not going to change. You should let shoes have a chance to breathe between the times that you wear them. Because if you think about it, shoes are dark and they're damp and they're warm. And nothing, mold and bacteria like nothing better than that. Your shoes are a petri dish. And they will rot from the inside out if you wear them every single day. So if you can get a couple pairs of shoes, rotate between them, they'll last way, way longer. This time of year, I'm sure all of us have seen a salt line on our shoes when we walk in, and the next day you got salt on your shoes. Salt rots shoes, just like it rots cars. And the easiest thing to do to get rid of salt stains on your shoes is to take a jar of white vinegar, put a little bit on a cloth, rub it across a bar of ivory soap. It's a mild soap. It will take the salt off, and And when you get done with that, put some mink oil or some neat's foot oil or Vaseline, something to protect the leather. But again, your shoes will last way longer if you just take a little bit of care of them. And I know we live in a throwaway society, but I still think if you got good shoes, you should take care of them. Maybe one last little fact. The French word for shoes is sabot, S-A-B-O-T. Some people call it sabot. But the word sabotage comes from that sabot word, because the French workers during the Industrial Revolution, if they didn't like what was going on, they'd throw their shoes into the machinery and gun things all up. And so they would sabotage the machinery.
I thought it was Dutch.
French.
Okay.
So I'm going to do a very little brief show and tell here. You can see I've got all kinds of stuff here. Some things that go back to the 1800s. And again, not all pointed shoes belong to women. This is a walkover shoe from the early 1900s, and that's pretty pointy. I don't know any man that I've ever met that could fit into that shoe, but back then somebody must have. Because either that or they bought the wrong size and they got stuck with them for 100 years. These fancy shoes here are baby shoes that belong to Jim Sarvay. So he would be 101 years old this year. And so his dad probably thought, those are pretty fancy shoes. I'll get some of those for my son. Some of these things are tools that I used on a daily basis. Andrea would tell you that this is something called a ball and ring. And for any of us who have bunions or hammer toes or a little toe that sticks up, or you would put this ball and ring inside of the shoe and get the leather between those two things, and you can create quite a pocket. Leather is very malleable, and once you get that shape made, it'll hold that shape. And so it allows you to have a much more comfortable fit. And that is one thing that Amazon doesn't do. I also used a shoe stretcher. And again, this wooden piece is something called a last. Back in the day, I don't know whether the people in China use these things, but the people in the United States use wooden lasts. There's hundreds and hundreds and thousands of them over the course of time. But they would drag leather around it and tap, 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 and get it so that it fit that shape. Nobody's foot is a perfect shape like a last. You know, you shouldn't think, boy, I can get a pair of shoes and they're going to fit right out of the box, because your feet aren't shaped like this. Nobody's feet are shaped like a last. But anyways, to make a stretcher, they'd take a last, cut it in half, and put a little gear in there. And so the more you twist that thing, you can make that expand. And then I would take my little rubber hammer and I'd be out back there, pound, 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 walk back out, and people would say, wow, those shoes feel great. How'd you do that? And those are the little magic tricks that I would do on a daily basis. A ball and ring, a hammer and stretcher, and it kept me in business for 37 years, those kinds of things. Again, you can see on my display over here, I've got lots of old shoes that go back to the 1900s, some with buttons on them, and I do have a button hook over here. I'm sure that button shoes didn't last very long once they figured out that they could put holes in their neck shoelaces, because this is a pain in the neck. Even this little tiny button up here is a pain in the neck. I've tried to button those shoes, and it's pretty close to impossible, but somebody had to do it. There are things here that are called spats. So if you had a pair of shoes like this fine little job, and you didn't like that taupe color, you could change out for a black spat or a burgundy spat and have to change your shoes without having to buy a whole brand new pair. And I hope you'll get the chance to take a look at some of the workmanship on these things. The detailing on the stitches and stuff is so ornate, and they just don't make shoes like that anymore. And when salesmen would travel from shoe store to shoe store to sell stuff, back then they didn't have a big ass SUV to drive around in, so they had to make do with what space they had. So they would carry samples and say, this is the kind of boot it'll look like. So if you take a look at these things, these are all tiny little salesman samples that they would travel around and say, okay, this is what your shoes will look like when they get big. One of the things that I used to say, and actually, I guess I'm gonna jump ahead just a little bit. In 1997, Jim Sarvay had retired, and Smith Grumman closed up. Walmart did get here to Cortland, and it was tough. I mean, it was really tough. There was a period of time where I wasn't sure we were going to make it. And there was a friend of mine in Rotary at the time who worked for an advertising company. He worked for Time Warner. And he convinced me that I should buy some advertising from him. Dwayne, my radio station guy, is not going to like this, but I spent $2,500 on 100 TV ads. And I stood in front of a camera and I said, if you've got a pair of shoes that's shaped like this, you should throw them away and forget you ever bought them. Because feet aren't pointed and your shoe shouldn't be either. Well, it turns out that people like that message because we turned around from 1997 on. Things went swimmingly well. So that's the shoe right there that says that's why it's here. You can see that we have some shoes that are kid skin, some that are calf skin, some that are alligator. I mean, humans have made shoes out of all different kinds of animals. You can buy things that are made out of snakes and elephants, but that one happens to be alligator. And again, this is from the 1950s. And again, the reason we have this, women always used to like to come into the shoe store and say, I've got a narrow foot. But then when I would bring out a narrow, this one's a 6.5 AAA. Well, maybe I'll wear meetings. So we ended up with lots and lots and lots of narrow shoes. And we got to the point where I don't want to buy those for me. But I will give Judy credit for bringing this shoe in because this one has a nice round toe. So I really like this boot as opposed to these pointy things. So I'll give Judy credit for having good sense even when she was in high school.
That was Rosie.
That was Rosie, that's right.
Did you ever sell non-leather shoes?
Not once I got to the point where I was buying.
Okay.
Not when I got when I got there, there was a company, I can't remember the name, but they were all man-made, and it's like, Jim, I don't think we should buy those anymore. And he agreed with me, so he let me phase that company out. I can't remember the name of them.
Yeah.
And obviously sneakers aren't leather. There's a lot of sneakers that are nylon or something, but we tried to always buy leather shoes because, again, it's something I believe in. I think your feet should have ability to breathe, and plastic shoes do not.
My daughter's been a vegan for 30 years and she doesn't wear any leather.
Well, so again, they can make shoes out of bamboo, they can make shoes out of other things, but I didn't want to have shoes that were vinyl. I didn't want to have shoes that were like that.
Tradition, tradition, tradition.
Yep. I'm getting towards the end here. I don't mean to hold you. Jamie asked me if I would include some amusing stories if I had any, and over 37 years you get some. So the very first year that I was there, 1977, maybe even that very first fall, I hadn't been there very long. So the full-time guys, they knew their customer base pretty well. And a lady walked in about 4:30 and said, you take her. It's like, okay, no, it was stupid. So I went out and she had me try it. She asked me for this shoe and that shoe and this shoe. 37 pairs. That's the most pairs of shoes I ever tried on anybody. But we went through 37 pairs. And the only reason I know this is because I counted them when we got done. And she kept me there till 5:30. And her husband owned a store up on Main Street. They both passed away now. I'm not going to name names, but he owned a store up on Main Street. She was just there to kill time. So thank you very much. I learned my lesson. I never did 37 pairs again. So I told you about the TV ad with that shoe. But we also did a TV ad that we had a lot of fun with, where Andrea was one of the stars. I had a sister-in-law at the time, Gloria Lorman Taylor. She ran Love of Pete. She was about 60 at the time, I think, when we did that TV ad, and she came in and sat down and said, Dale, I want to try on a pair of shoes. It makes me feel like a college girl. So they took a picture of me putting this sneaker on Gloria, and then we did this little Stardust magic, and there's St. Andrea. And you can't believe how many husbands wanted those shoes. So the power of TV. One time, Kathy and I were at the Parade of Homes in Syracuse, and we were at the Center Progress building, and there's thousands of people in there, just thousands of people. I don't know anybody in Syracuse, but some guy yells out from across the room, "Hey, you're the guy on TV!" It's like, yeah, I am. So you don't realize how much power TV has until that. And maybe my wife's favorite story comes from a Christmas party that the teachers had. She taught Virgil, and so the Virgil teachers had a Christmas party at the Red Dragon. And we were there with lots of other teachers and student teachers, and there was this she was beautiful, this student teacher, curly red hair, and I'm sitting over here with my wife and the teachers, and this, every once in a while I'd glance up and this girl's staring at me. It's like, damn, she After a while she came over and she said, "Would you mind if I got a picture with you?" And I said, "Yeah, great. I'm feeling pretty good about myself. I still got it." So she takes a selfie, she leans over and she says to me, "My grandmother's gonna love this picture." So I'm supposed to, Mick always tells me when you talk to a group, you should tell a joke or two. And so there aren't many jokes that I know, but I'll tell a couple.
Don't tell one of his.
No, I won't tell you. So, pulled into a gas station the other day to get some gas, and the first pump, nope, not working. So I pulled up to the next pump. It's not working. So I walked into the gas station. I said to the girl, I said, "Do you have your pumps on?" She goes, "No, I'm wearing my Uggs today." So I had a guy come into the shoe store and he wanted a pair of wingtips. And wingtips, for the ladies who don't know, wingtips are pretty stiff. A lot of the business guys wear wingtips because they shine up nice, but they're a little stiff. And so I said to the guy, "These are probably going to be snug, a little uncomfortable for a couple of days." He goes, "That's okay, I won't wear them until the third day." One more. I'll stop it. Do you know what you get when you wear tap shoes across the river? River dance. Do you know what you wear when you wear Crocs across the river? Eating. Or, yeah, that's kind of. So I'll stop by saying, first of all, 10 days ago, I came face to face with my own mortality. My heartbeat went to 28 beats a minute. And so my cardiologist said, "You can't go back home, you gotta go right down to Sayre," and they put a pacemaker in me 10 days ago. So I have a funny little bump under my shoulder right now. So you realize that you've only got a certain amount of time. And so I learned when I was at Sarvay something I relearned it, I guess. You learn it in kindergarten, we all did. Treat people the way you want to be treated yourself, and you'll probably be pretty successful. Kindness and courtesy are very simple things. I watched an interview with Warren Buffett just recently, and he said, something you can give away, doesn't cost you anything, kindness, and you'll get it all back. And he's obviously done pretty well for himself. So I will end by saying, Jamie, thank you for asking me to do this. Thank you folks for coming. And I'm standing here very willing to answer and do what I can to answer any questions you might have. Thank you again.
My grandparents were customers, my parents were customers, I was a customer. But what I remember best, you didn't mention today, was when I was just a youngster on Central Ave. And there was this machine in the middle of the store that I stuck my foot in and looked in, and I could see the bones in my foot.
Yep,
I think it was called a
it
fluoroscope.
was called a fluoroscope, and do you have any idea why those things don't exist any longer? There was an X-ray, and they never gave you enough X-rays to cause a problem. But for the poor soul who was standing there looking and telling you what, day after day, customer after customer, a lot of shoe clerks died of brain cancer from those X-rays going through their eye sockets and into their brain.
Was that the
So they
name
did
for it?
away with it. That's what it was called, a fluoroscope.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yep. And so the Brannick device is way better for my health than mine. So, yes. Anybody else was?
I remember, didn't you give kids balloons?
I used to give out balloons, and unfortunately I gave them all out. So and the other thing that I used to love were called balloon race cars. You blow them up, little balloon, and they'd zoom across the floor. And I don't know if you remember, Mike Dowdy used to be the principal at the high school, and his son, young Mike, would come in, and that was all he ever wanted, was a balloon race car. And so they were great, and we had balloons with cat ears on them, and after a while, that company that was in the United States, and that's one of the things I should say, all of this stuff that you see here was made in the United States. When I first came to work at the shoe store, the only company that we carried that wasn't made in the United States was Rockport, and they were made in Brazil. By the time I got done, nothing. Every single company had gone overseas. Florsheim, Dexter, there was a company called Energetics that made shoes in Auburn, Jumping Jacks, Stride Right, everybody had gone overseas. And that there are probably some bespoke companies that make shoes in the United States now, but
Like Aurora.
yeah, like that. But and I said to folks, even when I was in business, once the Chinese people figure out how to make cars, Detroit's got a big problem on their hands, and I think they're seeing that right now. Is that BYD company out of China is going to eat their lunch. The Chinese people can turn out a lot of stuff, and they make really good stuff, but it's not a job that benefits Americans at all. And it used to be, not just the people who worked in the factories, but the people who tanned leather, and the people who made shoelaces, and the people who did all of those other ancillary things that go along with manufacturing. So yeah, that's very, very sad. Jamie?
Dale, am I remembering correctly, you also had a lot of handbags, correct?
We did sell a lot of handbags, and again, there's something. Jim was friends from college with this guy. His last name was Richie. I can't remember his first name. But he had a company called Richie Royal Handbags out of Syracuse, and they were all vinyl. They were terrible stuff. Early on, probably it was 1981 or 82, the Red Cross Shoe Company, which is out of Cincinnati, made a whole bunch of handbags that went along the same leather as their shoes, so it would match your. And I said, Jim, let's buy some of these. And he said, it's either $40. I don't want to buy $40 handbags. But I convinced him that, let's just buy 8 or 10 of them, and we sold them. And so after that, again, he gave me kind of carte blanche to continue on. And we had some really nice, there was a company called Victoria Leather that we sold a lot of those. They were out of Pennsylvania. I don't know if they're still in business or not. And then there was another company that had fabric handbags with cats and stuff on them. And we sold a lot of those. They had cats and fish and snakes. They were fun. They were out of Texas. Sun and Sand was the name of that company. The other thing I should say, the YMCA used to bring their little kids in for show and tell, I guess. And the kids always wanted to ride on the ladder. So I would give them a ride on the ladder, and I don't know if you remember that ladder, but I ran on a metal track. And so, we'd push them back and forth. And so one of the things I always did when I was giving these kids a push on the ladder, because it would go choo, 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 was blow on my train whistle. They got the biggest kick out of that. Me too, you know. So. Anybody else? Again, I hope you've had a good time. I hope it was worth your time to be here. And, thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Dale. It was just terrific, and we really appreciate the wonderful presentation and the history. And one thing since I didn't write enough notes, I forgot to mention, is that Dale has very graciously agreed to allow us to photograph everything, and those who have been in the museum may know that one of the things we've added recently are touchscreens, interactive touchscreen displays, and that allows us a lot of display space that we wouldn't have for physical displays. So we will be working on adding a touchscreen display on the history of Sarvay Shoes, and I'm sure I'll be bugging you for some of the, to make sure the information is accurate, but I think that'll be a really fun thing to do, so thank you. And so again, please join us for refreshments in the cafeteria. Take your time looking at Dale's things, and thank you so much. It was just wonderful.
I had a blast.
Yeah, it was Oh, I forgot about the fundraiser. Should have put that down. As everyone admires Dale's handlebar mustache, please know that he has also graciously agreed to subject himself to a vote as a fundraiser for the Central New York Living History Center. And right out in the lobby, you can vote $1 a vote, as many votes as you want. Should it stay or should it go? And if it stays, we'll let everybody know that. If it goes, we may film the going. We may do something fun with that. But thank you, Dale, for being willing to do that. And all the proceeds will benefit the center here, our operational costs, the typical things that we need to fund to keep the lights on and the heat going and everything else. Sorry. Oh, not a problem. So, thank you.
Looking at your boxes there, when did rubbers and buckle boots go out of style?
Well, buckle boots, again, when I came to work there, we still sold buckle boots. We had them in the back on Central Ave, and every once in a while, you'd come in and buy a set. But we sold rubbers right up to the end, not that people wear them very much. In Central New York, if you don't wear rubbers and especially if you had leather-soled shoes, your shoes would soak through from the bottom, and so rubbers made really good sense. People don't do it, but they should. But yeah, you probably still could buy Tingley rubbers. We used to sell a lot of Tingley rubbers, but I don't see many anymore. Everybody's got Gore-Tex or they got rubber soles or whatever.
How many years have you had the mustache?
Well, you know what? In 1969, Robert Redford and Paul Newman made a movie called Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And so I fancied myself as Robert Redford. He had a little Fu Manchu mustache. And so it started out being down. And what you find out with a mustache that goes down is it gets a lot of pizza and so I started rolling it up out of the way, and that probably happened about, 1975. I think I rolled it up for the first time. So it's been up a long time, 50 years. But I did do a fundraiser for the Red Cross in 1993, so again, 30 years ago. And it raised about $3,000 for them, and they decided that I could keep it then. $2,700 to keep it and about $300 to cut it off. And oddly enough, one of my old girlfriends from high school gave $50 to keep it. She didn't want to see it. And I think my wife did too, because she's never seen me without it. So she's not sure whether she wants to see the whole package. Are we on?
Yeah, well.
Hey, how are you? I'm good, but I'm done. I didn't mention Nate Porter. Where is Nancy?
Central Ave, the old Sarvay Shoe Store that I recall, right across from Harrington Brothers. Nothing in there now. This was a happening street back then. Here I was in this barber shop with my father. Then I had my own shop here. And John and Jim Sarvay used to walk by there every day. All we merchants would park our cars on Church Street here and